name is Danette Murphy, and this is my informative speech. The topic of my speech today is regarding tax exemption status in religious organizations such as churches. Religious organizations in the United States have enjoyed tax exemption status since the founding of our country, and they do enjoy an increased tax benefit over other charitable organizations. So we're going to go ahead and dive a little deeper into that. I believe I'm qualified to speak on this topic as I am someone that was raised in a church that encouraged us to donate a significant portion of our income while not having to be taxed for it and not necessarily needing to prove that they were doing anything for the community. There are three main points that I would like to discuss regarding this topic. My initial point will be the history of tax exemption status in the United States and where the idea stemmed from globally. My second topic will be regarding why it might be an advantage for the country to maintain tax exemption status for churches. And finally, I will discuss why tax exemption status in the United States for churches might be detrimental. So to go ahead and start, we're going to go ahead and discuss the history of tax exemption status and where these ideas stemmed from. The first notable moment when tax exemption occurred for churches was actually all the way back in Roman times. Constantine, which was the Roman emperor from 306 to 337 AD, converted to Christianity in 312 AD. And shortly after his conversion, as a way to appear more pious to the clergy people and to possibly gain their favor, he went ahead and granted total tax exemption status to the Christian church. In medieval England, the government granted tax exemption for any property that was used for religious purposes. And the reason for that was because they felt it actually took some pressure off of them as a government to do certain social services that churches often did. And because they felt that churches provided so many benefits to the local people and the community that they deserved to have a benefit in return. So that benefit ended up being tax exemption status. So these ideas behind allowing churches to not pay taxes stems from a very long time prior to the founding of our country. During the time and period of our country before we were officially a country and we were just some colonies, this was already unofficially a practice for many of the colonies. And it wasn't until the first year after the founding of our country in 1777 that the first state went ahead and put it officially into law. Shortly after, other laws followed suit for other states, and as this trend continued, many early presidents did express their concern of the trend for a few reasons. Initially, they just felt that it kind of blurred the line a little bit between the separation of church and state, and they were worried that over time the churches would gain so much power from their tax exempt status that they could push America into a theocracy, which is the opposite of what we wanted and was against what the founding fathers had wanted when building this nation. Ulysses S. Grant was the first president to officially come to Congress and speak to them about the issue and basically discussing it as the vast amount of money that we were losing by allowing tax exemption status to continue. So he came to Congress in 1860 saying, hey, in 1850, we've already lost $93 million per year, which for this time was still a massive amount of money. He said by 1960, that amount has already doubled. And he went ahead and using the same trend that he had seen, stated that, hey, by 1900, we're going to be looking at over $3 billion per year of lost tax revenue. And so in addition to the loss of this income that could have been used for other services in the country, he was worried that other people in the United States that did have to pay taxes might come to resent the church for it and resent the government for allowing this to continue. So it definitely has a history of being a controversial topic that not everybody agreed on. And even to this day, as you will see, we will be discussing why that could still be a controversial topic. So now that we know some of the history behind the tax exemption status in the United States, I'd like to go ahead and discuss some of the benefits for tax exemption status. The first one being that hey, and churches do not have to pay tax. They do feel a little bit of pressure to give back to their community as a way to prove that they deserve this tax exemption status, but also to possibly encourage other people in the community to visit their church and possibly donate some of their income. And because people who donate their money to a church get deductions on the taxes that they pay, it is tempting to go ahead and donate to that specific organization over other organizations that may not be able to give you that deduction. Additionally, some larger churches will have paid staff on hand, and that for certain communities can be a creation of jobs and could be an economic benefit to the communities. And beyond that, churches do go ahead and provide like a sense of community and allow people of different backgrounds or people that wouldn't normally be able to get together to meet together and share ideas. And it does build that sense of community if there is a thriving church in the area. So there are some benefits to the tax exemption status, and we will go ahead and now be discussing some of the disadvantages for tax exemption status. One of the major disadvantages of tax exemption is obviously the loss of tax revenue that we experience in the United States, especially because there are so many churches and some of them are quite massive and profitable. We're looking at a lot of revenue that could be lost, that could possibly even, take some pressure off of the local taxpayer at the individual level. So that is a disadvantage. And because of the ability of individuals who are donating their money to get tax deductions, it does increase the ability that they're going to donate to a church versus a different charitable organization. So, for example, currently there's over half of Americans donate to a church on a monthly basis. But if we're looking at a calendar year, we're now looking at 70% of Americans are donating to a church. And that's a significant amount of money that is not going to other charitable organizations. Another disadvantage is that churches do not have to prove in any way, shape, or form that they do anything for the community or do any sort of public goods, whereas other charitable organizations do have to do that. And finally, some of the tax codes do mention that churches need to not be endorsing any political candidate or any campaigns in order to remain this tax exemption status. And while churches necessarily do not, it isn't very widely enforced, and so churches could slip and say it during a sermon, and that would not lose their tax exemption status. And in addition to that, we have people that are making their tax exempt income or profit, and they could be individually donating that money to a political candidate, which again, people feel could be blurring that line of separation between church and state, which is obviously a very important part of the founding of our country. So in conclusion, today we discussed the topic of tax exemption status in the United States. I discussed a little bit about the history of it, the pros and the cons for this tax exemption in the country. I hope this was informative, and as you can see, this has been a long-standing tradition in the United States and around the world, even though it is a controversial topic and not everyone agrees on it. Thank you so much.